All right, do you think? I don't know who that is. Whit Halloran. Anybody know Whit Halloran? It's actually me. I think it's still up and running. Is that publisher or tower?
Do a slideshow if you would.
Just from beginning.
Wait, there you go. Got it.
Now is your clicker working?
Oh.
Yes, okay, good.
What'd I do?
No,
You
I
didn't,
He
Remote
brought an
control.
automatic clicker. He just thought about it. It's, wow.
I'm impressed.
I don't have it.
Now get me back to this where I'm seeing the webcam. Oh, no, give me the Zoom. I'm gonna make you run it.
The problem is if I can do this.
It shows it. Oh, you won't see it because I'm screen sharing.
Right.
So stop sharing. Start the video. It says webcam.
Hold on, it's gonna be live.
Yeah. Click here. Start my video.
So it's usually activity. It's this is the one that's you want to record of this one, right? This is.
I don't need to record it.
This is the years.
Yes.
So they're just going to show you.
Okay, but it should be showing the webcam.
Stop sharing the screen. You want to share screen?
Yeah. That's where we are. Oh. Share screen. Yeah, go back.
So this is your meeting, right? Okay. So everyone's gonna log in, you can welcome them and do all that. Then when it's time for the presentation.
Why are they
How
not?
you doing?
Why are
You just
they
go to
not
share
showing
screen.
people?
Okay.
Well.
And here's camera.
Did you see
That's
earlier
what you should be
today?
seeing. That's what I should be seeing.
Okay.
Ready?
So yeah, you can. But see that, so I think that's what people want to see. Whatever's coming out of your.
Yeah,
Until you share screen.
until I share the screen and show all the
Yeah.
faces. So we can show all the faces
No, not yet.
up until 7.
Yeah,
Yeah, we can see like this for now.
That's good.
Okay, so I don't know who's Whit Halloran.
And I have a book for you before I leave, before you leave. Oh, okay, very well.
Oh.
You need to get a new mouse, huh?
And yeah, you need to upgrade your model. Like in 2021. That's 2004 models or so. It's amazing you find parts from anymore.
So what's this meeting controls?
I don't know.
Okay, so if I go here. Charge the meeting.
I didn't worry about that. So I would say we'll start to log in. Keep
There's
it as-
3 participants now.
keep it as is. And then,
Well, how do I get to my faces? There, Russ made it here.
So we'll just like, have to figure out, make sure I can see everything.
Yeah, well. Some places that we should do this.
They don't put too much on that. See, your camera is being over, this camera is being overridden by that camera. That's why you're not seeing the.
That's right. Okay. Got it.
All right.
Oh, you have to let them in, did you let them in?
Ah, there's Russ.
Let's go to HTV, we can do this.
How y'all doing?
Very good.
Yeah,
I can't hear you.
they might not be muted.
Well, let me keep poking around, see if I can figure it out.
Well, I think you set up.
Is that any better?
Everyone muted?
Now, is that what headphones I'm using? What speakers I'm using? Oh, no, that would be my settings. Are my speakers not?
Hold on, you gotta turn it on.
I think so. Well, oh, somebody stepped on the thing. Right now?
No, that was off.
No.
I just unmuted. Can you hear me over there?
On again. This is not going well.
Hello, this is Ian Michko. I finally had to call in to be heard.
Can y'all hear me over there?
Yeah, thank you. Can hear you well. Can you hear me?
I can, loud and clear.
Oh, but you need to. You probably don't need to hear me.
Plug plugged in. There's a plug. Where's the,
There's a power cord?
yeah, there's a power cord. Where does this?
Is that-
There should be a power cord for this. In the box, maybe?
Yeah.
Put it in there.
Now I got a picture of you too.
Well, how do you do? Nice to meet you. I'm Whitney Halloran. Thank you very much. I heard of this through Jack Cunningham.
Yes.
I'm in the SAR, the Massar, and I'm in the Knox Color Guard, and looks like a great theme you got going tonight.
Oh,
I agree.
oh. Hello?
Here comes Steve G.
Got it.
I can see you.
Minor technical.
I can see most of you anyhow.
Good. We got it. All
Now
right.
you need to get that back up
Yeah, that is,
and running. Oh,
is it working?
so you have to turn it back on
That's
because we unplugged it.
Yep. Let's shut the power
Needs a minute.
off.
Oh, I can see it doing something.
Yeah, it just has to think and then we'll be ready.
Okay, all right. Is this the one you have to hold?
Here it comes.
There it is. Yeah. Okay, all right. Steve Grossman, you're on there twice.
That's how I feel today, I guess.
All right.
I don't know what I did.
Can I count you twice, Steve? How many people are down in that bar room? There's a ton of people down in the ballroom. I mean, down in the bar room.
Yeah, see if we can jump out of the door.
Bravo. That's what you're, are you gonna see too? Ancient honorables.
Take that for granted.
Yeah, but it's canceled.
Yeah, cancel it.
Yeah.
Back and stuff.
Are you gonna see, Joe?
And it's-
Hello, Colonel. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Russ.
We can't see you, sir.
No need to.
Now you're- got your voice?
Okay, I got you. I got you.
Can you hear me?
I can, loud and clear.
Good, good. Can you hear them, George?
Oh, yes.
I'm gonna have our speaker say something, see if you can hear him.
Hello?
You all heard that?
Yes.
Okay, good, good. Yes, Steve, can you hear that? Did you hear hello?
Doesn't look like it.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it to me either. Mark, are you okay?
Yeah, I just muted myself.
Okay, Steve?
I'm here.
Yeah, Steve, yeah, the other Steve. All right. Okay, it's 7:02. I'm gonna give everybody a 10-minute grace period.
Idea.
So you guys can talk amongst yourselves.
What's that? Saturday Night Live? Is that where that's from?
Yeah. How is Whit Halloran today?
Oh, hey, fantastic. Thank you. Whit Halloran is doing great. How you doing? Thank you. Now that's my buddy George Podmore, SEOIRSC. That's George Podmore, also in the Henry Knox Color Guard.
All right. Okay. I see you guys. Okay.
Well, we love joining you guys on the bridge April 19th a few times, and this year I guess they went up on the Concord Hill and fired. Right, you guys do an incredible venue. My God. And that march is always something. Holy cow! What a feat!
Well, we did march, but it was only to the Concord line because Concord wouldn't let us march in Concord. So,
I see.
yep. So we didn't fire from the bridge at the Old North Bridge, but the Wayside Inn has a bridge, and we use that as a stand-in.
Excellent. Yeah. Know it. Yes, exactly. We now I see why they call it the bridge over there
Yeah.
at the Wayside.
Yes, that's what we meant. Yep.
I finished 2.
If you're
Go in
opening
that
the
road.
boat near the flags, then we don't have to move the camera.
I will do that. Thank you. Thank you for being the camera person.
I like being the camera person.
Oh, I should wear my hat to get the opening.
Kinko's wants to do this for $24. Wait to go on. Gotta find a publisher.
I'm giving them a 10-minute grace period.
And I want to keep it. They said the black and white was kind of across.
Shall I? Did Mary go down to get people?
I'll try it.
That's just a function of getting a publisher.
Yes.
It's not money.
Jim. Excuse me, George, I'm sorry. Jim, is the Memorial Day parade in Sudbury canceled?
Yes and no.
Then I will call on you to talk about it.
Yes,
Okay. All right, good.
that's why I came down.
Thank you.
Hi.
I thought.
Hey, Whit.
Explaining to do.
Yeah, I thought about sending you an email and it was like 4
Yeah,
o'clock and I
no,
said,
it's-
he
it's
won't
gonna
get
be
it.
like last year,
Yeah,
essentially.
yeah, okay. And the ancients canceled theirs.
They canceled the parade, not June Day. So, you know,
Can you talk to
like I'm
that?
still invited, but
Can you talk
there's
to
no
that?
parade and there's no lunch, and there's no dinner.
So what's left?
I can talk about that.
Ceremony on the common.
Yeah, it's our ceremony,
Yeah.
you know. So I can talk about that with the story. But yeah, the parade for the ancients is canceled, Memorial Day is canceled.
Yeah, okay.
We're in the cancel culture.
All right. Yes. Everything I'm saying.
Hey, Whit, I don't get it. I'll have to figure it out later.
What are you figuring out?
In the chat, how do you, writing a message in there, how do you come up with, signing off with your name?
Oh,
You know, where it says from, it has the name. How do you put your name where it says from?
okay, go back to your screen.
Okay,
And if you put your cursor over your face or whatever you're looking at, up in the corner, on the top, on the right, it says mute, and then the 3 dots.
let's see. Oh, okay,
Hit the 3 dots,
yeah,
and it should
Rename.
say rename. Got it?
got it.
Okay. That's it.
Okay, I got my right name in there. I'm just, and I want to write from me in the chat, that's all.
He means in the chat. I think it's automatic.
Oh, yeah, the chat pulls from here.
Yeah, but he means.
My name is George, but I just have it in Irish because I do a lot of Zooming in Ireland.
Oh, nice. George,
I don't speak Irish fluently, but I can speak it.
you speak Gaelic?
Ta.
Yeah.
There's no direct yes or no in Irish, but when you're speaking the Irish, if you want an affirmative answer in Irish, it would be ta.
Okay, so somebody says you know how to sing it.
Well, I sang today on Zoom for some of my Irish colleagues. I sang today. I sang a prayer song that I sing in church a lot for the Irish club I belong to. It's called "Be Thou My Vision," but I sang it in in Irish. It's called "Be Hissa Mohula."
Okay, 7:09. 1 more minute for all you lackadaisical people getting drinks.
Oh, no, it's not enough.
But I sang this year at the Colonial Inn for our on Patriots Day when we had there was 18 of us from the Mass Color Guard, Knox Color Guard at the Colonial Inn this year.
Well, that's
We
good.
did. We did.
18 is good.
Well, I've never seen that many in the Knox Color Guard at one function, that many.
Well, I know you stole one guy from my march.
And then
Yes, well, since we started doing it again, right, George?
Yeah.
2016, when Commander Cunningham got us going again to join
Yeah.
you guys,
Yeah.
we were there able to fire after you, who've done it so long. So that was a great honor to be able to get that going again.
Speakers work.
Well, one of our members of our color guard, Jack Mobley, he's personal friends with the chief of police or the police commissioner, whatever it is in Concord. He's good friends with the chief of police.
Sure.
So we got the fire in Concord. So, but this year we honored our Patriot pastor, Garrett Lear.
All right, 7:10. It's time.
Turn you on. You need to turn you on.
How do I do that? No, I'm gonna stand in front of it.
Yeah, but I don't have the camera. It's not working.
Share screen gets me a
Yeah.
camera? Share screen gets me a camera.
Yeah, under camera. There we go, perfect. Perfect.
Welcome, everyone, to our May muster. We will start, as we always do, by honoring our country and those who fought for it by a pledge of allegiance. I don't see Joe Tyrrell up here on the sign-in, so I'm guessing he doesn't want to have us do a formal treasurer's report, but I will tell you that the powder is all sold. We've covered our expenses, and that we have roughly $12,000 in the treasury. Okay, from the quartermaster?
Nothing, sir.
Nothing from the quartermaster? From the lieutenant colonel?
Nothing to add, except just reflecting on the day, it was pretty awesome weather-wise, and I feel everything was pretty awesome. And it's like observations on our march. Oh, yeah.
We did have a march on Patriots Day. We did the Wayland. We fired at the cemetery. We fired at the birdhouse. We then came to the Sudbury Center, where we marched to the Concord line, towed the line like we always do, and fired our last volley, where we came back to the inn, and we had a small ceremony at the bridge, firing off the bridge, which stood in for the Old North Bridge. The men got paid, so we actually passed out our paymaster, and they all got their shillings. Some of them spent it horribly in the bar room. And then we had a little concert from the ancients and our normal flag ceremony, and the inn graciously provided us with lunch. So we did pretty well, considering the difficult circumstances we were in. So I'm going to ask Jim Weagle to talk about a couple of parades that would normally be coming up at this time of year.
So the question is there going to be a Memorial Day parade? Yes and no. Is there going to be an ancient and honorable parade? Yes and no. And so let's first talk about Memorial Day. Is there going to be a parade? No. Is there going to be the usual ceremony up at Grinnell Park? No. Thanks to COVID restrictions. And so we're going to probably do what we did last year, which is Sudbury comes a minute and then do their thing, firing up at the North Cemeteries, coming back to behind the town hall, and firing at the Red Horse Cemetery. Then I would ask them, and I don't know exactly what the timing is going to be. My guess is 11 o'clock, 11:30, to join us at Wadsworth again, and then we'll have a kind of a mini ceremony like we did last year, raising each of the service flags. Playing the national anthem, followed by firing of the militia, and the playing of taps, and that's probably going to be it. Maybe there might be some remarks by the town Armed Forces Reserve manager, double duty, Mike, between Marlboro and Sudbury. But that's going to be about it. So I imagine the whole ceremony at Wadsworth might be 15-20 minutes. So that's what we have. I did alert the chief of police, Chief Nix, about Sudbury Militia be firing up at the North Cemetery. So if they get some phone calls to the police station, they'll know about it. So I kind of covered that one. So pretty much the same as last year, except the whole ceremony is going to take place at Wadsworth. My guess is 11:30. We haven't set the exact timetable yet, but that's pretty much it. All right. Regarding the ancient and honorables, there is not going to be an ancient and honorable June Day parade. So there's no lunch in the Faneuil Hall, no parade, and no dinner in the evening. What they have is going to be, thanks to COVID restrictions again, they will have a ceremony on Boston Commons, a change of command for ancient members and elected officers, one of their elected officers. And that'll be followed by, I think, applause beer at the hotel. And that's kind of it. So there's not a whole lot going on for June Day. So kind of scratch June Day this year, as indeed it was scratched last year. Hopefully next year we'll be doing something. So any questions?
Do you know about the 4th of July parade?
No. And I'm not, I got nothing to do with the 4th of July parade.
Okay.
I'm just chairman of the
believe- yeah.
Memorial Day parade.
Okay, canceled.
It's been canceled? Yeah, wonderful, okay. So, once again, I don't have much guidance there. If the Minute Militia wanted to fire somewhere in a cemetery, that sort of thing, you probably could do it. If you want, just let me know what you'd like to do so I can run it by the chief so he knows. But that's it. Any other questions? All right,
Got a question.
is there a question?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
What kind of issues were involved
what kind of,
in the not firing from the bridge in Concord, if I may ask?
So you broke up, Russell. What was the question?
Were
Because
you able to hear that?
National Park was closed.
they sent out messages to Lexington and Concord and Bedford and
Acton,
Acton and
everybody.
Sudbury, don't even think about it, forget about it. So that's the short of it.
That's my question. Does anybody know why or what the issues were?
The
Oh,
National
COVID.
Park.
National Park, they just said, we're closed, do not come, don't even think about it,
Okay, thank you.
we will arrest you.
Okay, the 4th of July parade is canceled. However, Sudbury has its own 4th of July ceremony that it does every year. It does a flag changing ceremony. So the details of that will come out in the next muster. I will send around the details Jim just gave me on the Memorial Day ceremony as well, before Memorial Day, and send it around sometime in the next couple of weeks. So, is there any other updates that anybody would really like? How's your chance?
Well, I've got a question. It's not an update. Are they still looking for docents for Saturdays at the mill? And are they doing anything on Sundays yet again?
They are not yet doing something on Sundays. I have a meeting later this week to talk with Steve about that. See exactly where we want to start up and what the rules are. But restrictions are starting to loosen a little, so now might be a good time for it.
What about the Saturday thing? Because they were even doing that last summer
They were
during
doing
the.
that last summer. I believe the pipe and drum were rehearsing there last summer, actually.
Well, we went over there and did the docent thing for
Yes.
on a Saturday, but I don't know if that's a thing again, if there's a sign up for it or.
Okay, those questions, I don't know the answer to, Steve, but I'll get them for you.
Okay.
All right, they were good questions. Jog the memory. Nothing else. Anything from the floor? Peanut gallery here? Oh, yes, thank you very much. If you are interested in running for one of the 3 offices that will be coming up in September, please let us know. I'd like to have a slate of candidates so that I could send it around prior to the September election. As you know, the new bylaws will kick in. You have three positions. You have a lieutenant colonel, you have an adjutant, you have a quartermaster. those will be elected separately. It's not a case of we elect a quartermaster that just moves up. That has been changed with the new bylaws. So if you are interested, or you know someone who might be interested, if you think of someone who might be good for the position, talk to them. Send us their
Or
name,
her.
and we will put it in.
Him or her.
Him is a generic term for me. It's not gender.
Or her.
Talk to the person. Okay? So, with that, I'm going to introduce our speaker for tonight. Everybody knows Geroge Quintal. He's done a lot of research on the soldiers who actually were there at the Battle of Lexington and Concord. And this time he's going to focus on those of color. George?
Could you ask the Sumis to mute themselves?
Yep.
It's okay. If they
Sumis.
ask questions.
So they can.
They can unmute.
Oh, they can
Please
unmute.
mute yourselves while he's talking and unmute yourself for a question. So he'll take questions. All you have to do is press the space bar and that will temporarily unmute you while you ask a question. George.
I'd like to thank Colonel Will for inviting me, and Ellie and John and Jen for setting up this complicated system and making it work. And I want to thank especially Allison Phillips and Dan Meenan and Alan Van Wert and Larry for their support of this research, which has finally resulted in something. So we're here tonight to talk about Patriots of Color from New England.
They're seeing this. Oh, they can see the whole thing?
They're seeing this.
All right.
And this is Bruce Harris. He was a former ranger at the National Park. He portrays Peter Salem, who was a soldier of color who fought at both Battle Road and at Bunker Hill and at 4 other battles during the war. And this was a 2000 ceremony that we both attended. People have asked me, how did you get started on this? Well, the whole thing was trying to find my own ancestors who fought in the war. I started that in 1974. It seems incredible to think that was so long ago. And it was about the early 80s that I came across a name in the records, Newport, Rhode Island. And you might think, well, that's a place. And I thought at first it wasn't. I thought it was a mistake in the records. That was actually a man's name. And he was a soldier of color. And he kept that name all throughout his life. And he died in Maine, in Deer Isle, Maine. And he's the one that really got me started thinking about, wow, there's some other people here that I hadn't really thought a great deal about. And I wanted to start documenting them. And that was 40 years ago. And so the result is what you're going to see tonight of this research. These are the 13 colonies in 1775. You can see that it was a seaboard enterprise, this settlement. Maine up there was part of Massachusetts. Here are the American Indian tribes that were here a little before the war. This is prior to the war. And all of the tribes in New England all fought for the Patriots. From the Penobscots in Maine, we have the Nipmuc, Wampanoag, the Pequots and Mohegans. And here, not on the chart, were the Stockbridge and also Narragansetts down here. All of them fought for the Patriot cause. The man who really was the first one to really deal with the Indians was the Reverend John Eliot in the 1600s. And he translated the Indian Bible for them. This is in Natick. And he worked very hard. He knew what was going to happen, that there was going to be an onslaught of settlers and that the Indian population would probably be overwhelmed. So he tried very hard to set them up and make them self-sufficient in the European style way. It lasted for a long time and it worked, but actually the war ruined this because a large percentage of the American Indian Patriot soldiers died during the war. And here you can see after the war, the surviving few Native Indians and the widows. And they said almost all that were able did go into the service of the United States and either died in the service or soon after their return home. We, your petitioners, are their widows. There not being one male left now that was then of age to go to war. So I think we owe these American Indian Patriots a very special honor because they pretty much got wiped out. So let's go to the election alarm. And here was the letter that was sent that day. And riders were going in all directions, including this one went to Connecticut. And eventually they went down to the Continental Congress. Here are the areas that responded to the Lexington alarm. And these are the towns that actually fought the British. And I couldn't get this map changed, but since I did this map, I've dropped Dracut. Dracut did not fight. And I've dropped Beverly, and I've dropped Medfield, but I've added Tewksbury and Wilmington and Stoneham to the list. 32 towns actually fought the British that day. Yes. That's Waltham, and nobody knows what happened to Waltham. And we're still trying to figure it out to this very day. I have a theory. There was a bridge across the Charles River, just that one bridge. And it was considered that the British were going to go back across that bridge to get back to Boston. And so there was a large force of American troops at that bridge. They took up the planks. And I think the Waltham men were at the bridge. So the British never did go by the bridge. So the Waltham men got kind of left out of everything.
Did they get an honorable mention at least?
They're on the map here, and they do get an honorable mention, yes. And here's the different types of men. I want to lead up to the militia 16 to 60, the Minutemen 25% taken out. These were elite soldiers, the alarm men, the old guys like me, light horse. There were some Rangers and of course warning riders. And I want to set it up because we'll come to our first soldier of color. His name was Nero Benson, and he was a warning rider. A trumpet sounded and some Framingham men came along with one Nero Benson, a Negro, for a trumpeter, and every house they passed had a blast. So all the categories had soldiers of color. How did I find these patriots? These are all the sources I went into. How did I find soldiers of color? Looking for names, descriptions, and status indicators. And I'll go through those quickly. These are the names I found of soldiers of color in 1775. It's a little hard to read. But for instance, the first name is Aesop. And if I saw the name Aesop, I'm 100% sure that was an African-American soldier of color. Some of the other names are a little unsure because there are a lot of Christian names like James. Both African-Americans and American Indians were named James. And those are the toughest ones to find. Names like Gloucester or Cuff or Caesar or Prince, those are much easier to find. So I went through all of my 1775 soldiers of color, and these are the top 15 names. Caesar, having 19 men named Caesar who fought either at Battle Road or at Bunker Hill. And you can see the other names. African-American names were Prince and Cato and Cuff and Pomp and Scipio. These other names were mostly American Indian names, the Christian names, Thomas, Samuel, Joseph, Isaac. Going through the records, I was looking for these words anywhere that I could find that would describe a man. And I was looking for these indicators. So one of the most exciting things for me in this research, many of these men were in slavery. At the Battle Road, I found that 2/3 of the African Americans were slaves and 1/3 were free. At Bunker Hill, shortly after, it's already half free and half slave. By 1777, it's almost all free men. And I wanted to document, how did men go from slavery to freedom? And it took me a long time, but I got it pretty well figured out, I think. And I'll go through the different ways. First of all, here's a bill of sale of an African-American young man who later became a soldier who fought at Bunker Hill, Jeffrey Hartwell. And the slaves would send in petitions to the general court. And you can read one of the petitions. They kept trying and trying. The divine spirit of freedom seems to fire every human breast on this continent. So here are the ways. Number one, manumission. Number two, a slave could purchase himself. Number three, just walking or running away. Number four, de facto for continental soldiers. Number five, ad hoc decrees. Number six, governmental decrees. And number seven, lawsuits. So we'll do the first one. Here's an actual manumission, and you can read how it was given. This slave owner, John Hoare of Lincoln, decided to set his slave completely free with no encumbrances at all. With one little caveat, so long as he behaves and conducts himself regularly and well. Purchase. Here is a slave purchasing his own freedom. And I find this probably the most fascinating thing maybe I've ever found. His name was Salem Poor. Has anyone heard of Salem Poor at the Battle of Bunker Hill? He purchased his freedom himself before the war even started. And I've tried to find out how could they do that. And here's one anecdote that I found. It's a slave, Peter, who was freed to go into the army. And he was put on guard duty one night. And at dusk, he just stopped and went back to his tent because he was used to stopping work at dusk. So what I think is either the slaves had some time off or did this work after dusk, but they were working and saving money on their own to save up to buy their own freedom. And one slave I found purchased his own wife's freedom because the wife was the key. Whatever status the woman was the status of a child. So this man, when he married this woman, he wanted his wife free so that his children would be free. Walking or running away. Here's Casey's sign at the National Park. Case, he was a slave and he just ran away one day. And here's a story, you don't have to read it, but two slaves walked away from their owner and just showed up at Cambridge camp. They had to walk all the way across the entire colony of Massachusetts to get there. And they wanted to be soldiers. Well, the owner went to Cambridge camp and the men were in jail because it was found out that they were runaway slaves. And he inquired to General Washington and he talked with the two slaves And they told him how desperately they wanted to be soldiers, and he set them free. And he not only set them free, he gave them money for clothing, for weapons, and pretty much set them up to be soldiers, and they were free from that point on. And both of them fought at the Battle of Bunker Hill. I tried to find a document that would say the Continental soldiers, if you were a slave going in, you were free. I could never find it. But here's a gravestone of a former slave. And if you can read, it says he was a soldier in the Army of the Revolution, in which case he received his freedom and a pension. And his name was Sharper Freeman. And this is what I found out, that a lot of slaves who wanted to go into the Continental Army would talk with their owners, and many of the owners would say, I'll let you go. You give me your bounty for going into the Continental Army in return. And that's what they did. So the bounty for going in was really the cost of their freedom. And from that point on, they received their pay as free men. Yes.
Where is that gravestone located?
Reading at Laurel Hill Cemetery. There was one colony, and it's the only one I found, Rhode Island, said, it passed a law that if a slave wanted to go into the Continental Army, he would automatically become free. But that's the only colony that I found. By the end of the war, there was only one Continental soldier that I know of that was not a free man by the end of the war. So it really worked to get rid of slavery. Lawsuits. In 1780, the Massachusetts Constitution said this: all men are born free and equal, but no outright prohibition of slavery. So you ended up with lawsuits. Slaves saw that and said, I'm free. Owners saw that, some of them said, no, that doesn't say you're free. So you had to end up with lawsuits. And one of the first was Pork Walker of Barre, Mass. And he really set the whole standard and pretty much made sure that the Constitution said, yes, slaves are free. But this lady is the one who really did it. Her name was Elizabeth Freeman of Stockbridge, and she started a lawsuit in 1783, which she won. And after that point, all former slaves in Massachusetts and Maine were now all set free. Here's the enlisting papers, signed by Horatio Gates. And you can see you are not to enlist any, quote, Negro into the Army. Well, they were already there. And General George Washington had kind of a problem because this was from the Continental Congress. So what are you going to do? And George Washington was an amazing diplomat. And he said to the Continental Congress, I know that you've outlawed African Americans from joining my army, but I want them. They fought very hard at Battle Road and at Bunker Hill, and they're already here. And I want them, and he was able to keep them in the Army. And we're getting charged up here. Any questions while we're in any questions at all? Yes.
I was under the impression that General Washington in 76, at any rate, didn't want anyone to follow.
At very first, when he first got to Cambridge, yes. But as the officers in his army started talking with him, he changed his mind pretty quickly. Yes.
That Pork Walker,
Yes.
did that take place, the trial taking place in Worcester? Was that
I'm not sure. I'll have to look into it further. I don't remember Worcester being mentioned in that case, but it could be. Worcester was county seat, so.
Did stand in front of the old courthouse in Worcester.
Oh,
And that was, I think.
it was there?
Mentioned in the papers.
His case would have been there. I've never had John Adams associated with it, but I will look into it. Yes. And here is what actually happened. And it says, Washington, at the crisis of his distress, finding that the black soldiers were very much dissatisfied at being discarded, reversed the decision of the Continental Congress. So let's go to Battle Road. About 20,000 men showed up eventually within a week. About 4,400 fought, and I've got my estimates, about 40 were men of color. And here's a little story of not a soldier, but a lady. You know about the two spies that went out, and they stopped at Brewer's Tavern in Waltham, and they called for dinner, which was brought by a black woman. At first, she was very civil, but afterwards began to eye us very attentively. We observed to her that it was a very fine country, upon which she answered, so it is, and we've got brave soldiers to defend it. And if you go up any higher, you will find it is so. And the two spies resolved not to sleep there that night. So we had African-American patriots, male and female. And when all of Battle Road happened, there were fears of a slave revolt. People were beginning to really feel this is something wrong and we have to right this. So in Framingham, all of the ladies went into a garrison house and they were very afraid that the slaves who were left behind after all the soldiers left to fight were going to come for them. But one of the ladies said, no, all of our slaves are patriots, and they were. So there was never a problem. Here's the map. And I do want to say that from the beginning at Lexington, there was at least one, and I think there were two on the common. And Prince Estabrook at Lexington was wounded, which makes him the first African-American soldier in the Revolutionary War, was wounded at the very first battle. There were at least two at Northbridge, and I think maybe 5. And at every skirmish along the way, there were African-American soldiers. And the very last skirmish at Charlestown Neck, the very last soldier to be wounded was an African-American soldier. And he was taken prisoner. So here is Prince Estabrook was wounded. I think Eli Perdue and Silas Perdue were also there, but it's very, very hard to prove. These were free black men who lived in Lexington. At Northbridge, John Oliver of Acton, Boston Wheeler of Acton, Caesar Jones, Caesar Minot, and Cambridge Moore were all slaves at that time. And there's local legend for each one of these 3 men that they accompanied their owners who were officers to Concord Bridge. These men would serve as what is called waiters, who would take care of officers' daily needs. There were both black waiters during the war and white waiters. At the Jason Russell House, I don't know if he was involved in the battle. I think he was involved in the battle just down the road, but Isaac Camacho was the first American Indian soldier to fight in the Revolutionary War. He was from Dedham. And there were 2 African-American men, mixed heritage men. And the local legend is that they were trapped in a cellar of a house, and the British tried to get to them and couldn't. And there is a story attached to the Jason Russell House that there were a number of soldiers trapped in the cellar, and the British tried to gain entrance to the cellar, and the soldiers shot up, and the bullet holes are still in the cellar way there. I think Caesar Ferret and John Ferret were at the Jason Russell House. And here's the last man of color, a Negro, the only one who was seen to fire at the King's troops, was wounded near the houses close to the Charlestown Neck, out of which the rebels fired to the last. I strongly believe this man was Caesar Augustus, a slave who was taken prisoner. So we had slaves and free black men and American Indians converging in the alarm. And here's a letter from Wethersfield that I love. It tells you what the men were thinking, what was going on. We are in motion here and equipped from the town yesterday, 100 young men who cheerfully offered their service, 20 days provision and 64 rounds per man. They are all well armed and in high spirits. And then they marched from Wethersfield to Cambridge. And in the Wethersfield men, at least one of the men was an African-American soldier. Time on Negro. 21 Stockbridge Indians came to Cambridge after Lexington, and they were Minutemen. So here we have 21 American Indian Minutemen. And I want to just mention how amazing this is. The Minutemen were the elites. They were picked out. 1 out of every 4 men were picked out of the militia. The strongest, fastest, best trained, best equipped men. And there were African-American Minutemen and American Indian Minutemen in the elite corps. And I think that is a great tribute to the beginning of our country. And this is what the letter that the chief of the Stockbridge sent. And if you could just read it, I think it's fascinating. He tells what good friends the Stockbridge have been with the European settlers, and how the Stockbridge are going to help the European settlers. And brothers, whenever I see your blood running, you will find me about to revenge my brother's blood. The brother was the European settler. Although I am low and very small, I will grip hold of your enemy's heel, that he cannot run so fast and light. The one thing the Stockbridge, they agreed to become Minutemen and become a part of the army, but they had one caveat. They didn't want to do the 1764 drill. So they applied to yes, I believe to Washington. He had gotten there by that time. And they said, we'll join you, but we don't want to do the drill that you do. We want to do our own drill. And I would just love to know if Larry or anybody knows what the American Indian drill was. It must have been completely different from the standard drill. And it was approved. They were allowed to do their own drill. Here are all the Minutemen of color that I've found so far. 46 Minutemen of color. I wish I could read a little better, but that's okay. And here are the soldiers of color who actually fought at Battle Road, 27. So let's go to Bunker Hill. There are about 18,000, some say 15,000 men at the siege of Boston. I think about 3,000 fought at Bunker Hill, and I think about 160 were men of color. Now here's Bunker Hill. Here's Charlestown. Here's Bunker Hill, but the battle actually happened here around Breedsville mostly. That's where the fort was. Also here at the rail fence behind the fort. And there was something called the Gap that was in the middle. This is where the Sudbury men who fought at Bunker Hill were stationed, at this gap. And here are the Sudbury Soldiers of Color. Only 3 that I've been able to find through all these years. Porter Cuddy, he fought at Bunker Hill. Cato Dennis showed up the day after Bunker Hill, so he wasn't in that, but he took part in the siege of Boston. And Cuff Nimrod fought also at Bunker Hill. I believe these men, from their names, were probably free men of color, because usually the slaves would take on the owner's last name.
George, was this Colonel Jonathan Brewer? What is that? Confirmed it, or what are you saying here about it?
That's who they served under.
They served him.
They were in Aaron Haynes' company. He was from Sudbury in Jonathan Brewer's regiment. And Brewer was from Waltham. So all 3 men served in Brewer's regiment, but in 2 different companies. And here's Bunker Hill. And this is looking from the north, south. Here's Boston. And it's about 3 o'clock when the British have set fire to Charlestown, right there. Here's the fort where the monument is now. Here's a breastwork. Here's the rail fence. And here is the gap. So the Sudbury men were somewhere in that gap. The British landed first right here at Moulton's Point and attacked, were thrown back. Reinforcements came here, attacked, thrown back. And on the 3rd attack, the British were successful because the Americans ran out of musket balls and powder. And I don't know Don Traiani, but he did allow me permission to give this. You can just see the ferocity. This is inside the redoubt of the Battle of Bunker Hill, just as it was forced and the Americans retreated. You can see an African-American soldier here in the painting. And here are the American Indians who fought at Bunker Hill, and there are their tribes right there. It took a while to figure out each one, but eventually you can do it. I highlighted Samuel Ashbow because he was killed at the Battle of Bunker Hill at the rail fence, and that makes him the first American Indian Patriot soldier killed in the Revolutionary War. So let's go through some of the battles and what happened at Bunker Hill. 3 men of color were killed. And I believe that's Saratoga. I can't see my own title, but that was Saratoga. 5 men of color were killed at the battles of Saratoga. I think and I'm pretty sure that there were 700 men of color fighting at the Battle of Saratoga. Here's the men of color who died at Valley Forge. I believe that there were 900 men of color at George Washington's Valley Forge encampment. And here's where we lost so many American Indian soldiers died of disease at Valley Forge. This is Monmouth, the Battle of Monmouth, right after Valley Forge. 10 men of color killed at Monmouth. And here is Yorktown. I believe there's more men of color. This is just something I've really started. 4 men of color killed at Yorktown. And here's one of the saddest things I've ever found in all of my research. Rebecca Tanner, who was an American Indian, Mohegan Indian, lost all her 5 sons in the American Army. So we'll have a summary. I think there were about 250,000 men who fought during the war, and about 5,000, maybe 5,000 plus, were men of color. They served in integrated units. Their pay, equipment, duties were equal. There was a glass ceiling on rank for African-American soldiers. The highest ranking African-American soldier I've ever found was a sergeant. The highest ranking American Indian soldier I ever found, because they had some set off units by themselves, ranger units, was a lieutenant colonel. Blacks and American Indians were staunch patriots. None in New England, no one I've ever found, and I've asked many historians, and no one can give me a single name of any man who joined the British service, any man of color from New England. Exceptional performance opened doors to enlistment and eventually freedom. And here's different engagements during the war and how many total soldiers I think there were, and how many soldiers of color, and the percents. And this is one of the most exciting documents I found in the New Hampshire archives. And being able to find the story, a wonderful lady sent me the story, the background story. John Stearns' father was the owner of Peter Stearns, a slave. And John Stearns' father set Peter Stearns free. And they both joined, the son and the former slave, both joined from Epping the same day, and look at their bounties. 60 pounds for the son and 60 pounds for the former slave, exactly equal. The Revolutionary War had a profound impact on both the Black and Indian populations of New England. It saw the beginnings of the end of slavery for Blacks, while the relatively small Indian population, which suffered a huge percentage of casualties, was seriously diminished. So we get to 1790, and how are things looking in New England? Well, Maine is still part of Massachusetts, and Massachusetts has, through the Constitution of 1780 and the lawsuits of 1783, abolished slavery. So we have zeros for Maine and Massachusetts. Vermont, from the very beginning, never had slavery. Vermont became a free republic, independent of the United States in 1777, and later joined the United States. And in their original constitution, it said no slavery ever in Vermont. So Vermont started from scratch and was the only one that outlawed it completely. So there's zero, but you can see that New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Connecticut still have slaves in 1790. And I went and I was curious, when did slavery end? And I went to all the censuses and looked. For New Hampshire, they got a zero in 1810, no slaves. But Rhode Island and Connecticut, they only got their zeros in 1850. So you can see that slavery in New England hung on for a very long time. And here's the monument to the 54th Massachusetts in Boston. The white officers, the Black rank and file, together they gave to the nation and the world undying proof that Americans of African descent possess the pride, courage, and devotion of the Patriot soldier. And I'm glad I got this photo in 2012, because last year in June, this monument was totally defaced by BLM and Antifa protesters. So the question was, for the soldiers of color, was it a cause worth fighting for? And these men in their pensions, if you could have asked them, you can tell from their pensions, they would have said yes. And I want to thank you for having me here tonight and being able to talk about the subject.
questions for George before we,
Yes,
And for the people of color, and I'll say black, were they all slaves or were any of them free people?
yeah, there was a large, there was a large population of free blacks in 1775. And through my research, I found at Battle Road, I can identify 1/3 of the African Americans were free and 2/3 were slaves. At Bunker Hill, shortly after, I can identify that it was 50-50. So you can see the movement starting away from slavery. Yes.
I have another question.
Yes.
The Battle of Newport, a siege of Newport. I've heard that there was actually a whole black unit there.
Yes.
How do they work that? Did they have a pension for that? Or was it just totally volunteer or was it coordinated with the other?
Normally, throughout the war, African Americans and American Indians, for the most part, served in integrated units. But it was decided in Rhode Island to raise, because Rhode Island had a very high percentage of slaves, it was decided to raise an all-black unit. And that's what they did in 1777.
Were they all free or slaves? Or?
They were free because Rhode Island passed a law that said, if you're a slave and you join the Continental Army, you will be a free man. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
I know earlier you mentioned the names that you were key names you discovered from the color. What about Indian names? Were they more like we have around here, the way towns are made, like whatever?
Sometimes their last names were usually of American Indian origin, but almost entirely their first names were Christian names. They had become Christians over the years. So you'll see James, John, Peter, Samuel, Isaac, all of those names are common American Indian names in 1775. Yes.
And a follow-up question. I
Yes.
was curious. First of all, I never even thought about Indians being a part of the revolution. That's my own ignorance. But I'm curious about the reasons because, I mean, 100 years before that, we were the ones that were displacing them from their territories and so forth, and yet they were willing to fight England, even though we were collectively or effectively their enemy, I guess you'd say. So.
Well, when the European settlers first came in the 1620 to 30 range, there was peace between the American Indians and the Europeans for 50 years. And then a white man murdered an American Indian. And that started King Philip's War. So, but before King Philip's War, with a few problems, there was widespread peace. And you remember what the Stockbridge Indians said to the European settlers in Stockbridge? We are your brothers. We will fight with you and for you. Yeah. The Stockbridge also got wiped out, not so much from, it's very strange. They didn't get the diseases like many of the other American Indians, but they were ranging. The British had New York City and Washington had West Point, but in between was a terrible no man's land. And American Indians were scouts down in that no man's land, the Stockbridge Indians. And one day they must have let their guard down and they got ambushed by the Loyalist cavalry and they pretty much got wiped out at what's now the Bronx, New York.
Michael Tupis wrote a book called Philip's War, which explains a lot of that, and a lot of people think that the Indians mistreated terribly from the time that Pilgrims landed, and that's not true. That just isn't true.
Yes.
Hi, George. Thank you.
Oh, hi, Tony.
Hi. Very enjoyable. Thank you very much. I don't know if I missed it, but I don't think you mentioned Peter Salem from Framingham.
Yeah, you did.
You did?
Yeah, he was
I missed it. I'm
on
sorry.
the Battle Road chart,
Yeah.
definitely.
Good.
Yes. Yes, Carl?
Do you have any idea how many slaves were in New England at the outbreak of the war?
I read once it was around 5,000. That's the best number I have. I have no accounting of numbers of slaves, but the wonderful gentleman who was my mentor through this research, Dr. Young, Alfred Young, he wrote one time that he estimated 5,000. Most of the slavery was in the South. Yeah.
Were they all slaves or were you just saying?
The 5,000 African Americans. All I can say is that at Battle Road, it was 1/3 free and 2/3 slave. The general population, I don't know if you can apply those ratios to the general population. I do know Lexington pretty well, and there were approximately 10 slaves in 1775, and there was a whole family, an extended family called the Berdews, who were all free and had been free for many, many decades. And I've been trying to find out how the original Berdew got his freedom, but I haven't found out yet. But in Lexington, it was actually around 50-50 free slave.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah.
So Washington, didn't he have an aide-de-camp that was maybe his slave or something?
Yes.
prior? So did he remain a slave, or was he slave/free kind of as he moved to Washington from the inception of the war?
As far as I know, he remained a slave, but Washington set all his slaves free in his will.
So he was still a slave while he was towing the line from
Yes.
Washington from battle to battle?
As far as I know, yes.
You weren't the white guy who made it to that spot.
And I have to put the caveat, as far as I know.
Okay.
Yes,
no,
he
I
was.
just curious.
Yeah. Any other questions? Anyone from Zoom have a question? Or?
Any Zoomies got any questions there? You've been awful quiet.
Well, I'll just say thank you to everyone for coming out tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you to George. That was certainly a very enlightening speech. Nice PowerPoint presentation. I'm sorry we couldn't straighten it out for you a little better,
It's fine.
but George has done an awful lot of work, and he's one of the people that we should be counting on to be one of our primary resources. So take advantage of him. I have his email address if you want to talk to him. And he has 2 very good books that you can purchase directly from George, or I hate to tell you this on Amazon, George.
Not on the internet. There's some pirated books on the internet.
Yes, they are poor copies at best. So next month, our speaker will be Robert Hubbard, who will talk to us about Rufus Putnam and his role at Bunker Hill. So make sure you join us next month and watch for the missive that will come in the middle of this month with all the details about parades and elections and things. Thank you. And with that, meeting is over.
Shall we head to the bar?
Yes, the Zoomies have to head to the bar. The Zoomies, you gotta be there because you buy the first round.
Enjoyed the presentation.
There we go.
Anyway.